Hello, and welcome back to our next lesson on a new function here, the input function. Many programs need to be interactive such that an end user can enter in data or information and then have that data be processed by the program in order to alter the performance of the program. In order to get this data from the user, or in order to allow user to input any information into our programs, we're going to use the input function. So the input function on its own has a neat little purpose. It will essentially pause a program until a user hits enter. So for instance, if I put a print message here and say hello, and I run this right now, that print statement won't occur until the user actually responds on the keyboard. So I could just hit enter, and then we print our message. The input statement becomes a little bit more powerful when we pass it an argument. The argument is going to be a prompt or message to display to the screen, informing the user as to what information they should enter. So I'm going to say, please enter your name. And so now when I run this, if we look here, that prompt is displayed. Please enter your name. So let's see, I'll put my name, Mike. And our program is still going to run the same regardless of what the user enters. So if I enter in Mike, or if I run this again and I enter in John, it still says hello. It's not interactive yet. The reason why is because this input statement, it's trying to return the value that the user entered. But nowhere are we grabbing that information, or nowhere are we assigning it to a variable. So what we should do here at the beginning of line 3, we need a variable, and I'll call it, we'll say first name, and I'm going to assign a value of the return from our input statement. So when I call this input statement now, Python is going to prompt, or this prompt is going to be displayed, please enter your name. If I type in Mike, that value is going to be assigned to a variable first name, which is really awesome because now in my print statement, I can say hello, comma, plus, and I'll do first name. And why don't I use the title method to make sure that this is always capitalized? So now if I type in Mike, lowercase, I get a response tailored to me. Hello, Mike. And if I run this with a different user input, such as John, all capitals, it says hello, John. So now our programs are a little bit more dynamic in nature using the input statement. Now, it's really important to note that the input function returns all of its data as strings. For instance, let's create a variable called number, and I'm going to set it equal to an input statement, and our prompt is going to say, please enter your favorite number. And so we'll print number, but then I also want to print its data type. So I'm going to print in the type function, and the type, I want to determine the type of the variable number. So if we run this right now, we're going to get our prompt, please enter your name. My name is Mike. Hello, Mike. Please enter your favorite number. My favorite number is 13. So it prints 13 right here. So we've captured that value. But if you look here, even though it looks like it's an integer, we're being told that it is actually a string data type. This is going to be pretty problematic if what we want from the user is an integer or float. Imagine here, right now, if I wanted to add, let's say add 5 to this number, let's do number plus 5, I'm going to get a type error. And it says right here on line 10, type error. We can only concatenate strings, not integers to strings, because I have an integer right here, and even though I entered in the number 13, that is being interpreted as a string. So I can quickly overcome that by just calling the int function and passing number to the int function. This is going to cast number to an integer so I can do my mathematics. And there we have it. We've added 13 and 5 together to get 18. So let's see how this might work in a little bit more robust of a program. So we're going to start by printing a message to the screen. We're going to say, give me any two numbers and I'll multiply them together. And so now let's create a variable. We'll call it num1, and we'll set it equal to the return of an input statement, and we'll prompt the user by just saying first number here. And we'll do something similar for our second number. Num2 is equal to an input statement, and we're going to prompt the user for the second number. Perfect. Now I need to calculate my product. So I'm going to create a variable, call it product, and we'll take whatever the user entered in as number 1, and we'll multiply it by whatever the user entered in as number 2. And then we should print the results. We'll say the product of num1 and num2 is product. So let's run this right now, and let's see what happens. Oh, I've got invalid syntax. Let's see if we can figure out where that is. Oh, I forgot my plus sign to join or concatenate these strings together. So I'll enter my name as Mike. My favorite number is 13. All right, so that works nicely. And now it says give me any two numbers and I'll multiply them together. My first number is 4. My second number is 5. And we get an error. And our error is on line 16. It says cannot multiply sequence by non-integers of type string. So I think what's happening here is that num1 and num2, because they're user input, they're strings. We have a difficult time performing this mathematical operation. So one way that we could change this is by taking our user input and turning it into an integer. So I'm going to wrap my input statement inside of the int function, int. Now, when we get down here, num1 is an int, num2 is an int, and we should be able to take their product. So let's check this. So Mike, my favorite number, let's make my favorite number 15 this time. All right, give me two numbers, 4 and 5. All right, we still got an error, but it's a different error, and so this is good. We can investigate this. This time it's on line 17, and we still have a type error. It says we can only concatenate strings, not integers, to strings. So let's look at line 17. The reason why here is I have a string, the product of, it's inside quotes, so it's a string. But now num1, num2, and product are all integers. So I can cast num1 to a string, I can cast num2 to a string, and I can cast product to a string. And so now, if we run this, I am confident that this will work. So 4 and 5, and we see right here the product of 4 and 5 is 20. Perfect. That's really great. Except what happens if a user maybe enters in a different number? What if they enter in, my first number is 5.5. Ooh, I get an error, and it says invalid literal for int with base 10, 5.5. Because we told Python that we expect an integer here for the first number, and what the user actually entered in was a decimal. And so that's going to be an issue. So let's do another quick example here. Instead of doing multiplication, let's print, and let's do a new line. We'll say give me any two numbers, and I'll sum them together. And so we'll call, we can override our variable, so we'll say num1 is equal to, and we'll call the input statement. We'll say first number. And then we'll do num2 is equal to input, and we'll say second number. But here, instead of casting to the integer, let's cast the user input to a float by calling the float function. This will allow the user to enter in a decimal. And so now I'll say sum. Ooh, and if you look here, this is interesting because we want to add the two terms together, and so that's called a sum. But you see how sum lights up here as purple? That's because sum is predefined in Python. There's a sum function. So we should probably not use it as a variable name. So instead I'll call it sum result. And I'll set this equal to num1 plus num2. And now I want to print my results. So I'll say print the sum of casting to a string num1 and casting to a string num2, being aware of the data types that I'm working with, is plus, and we'll cast our sum result to a string as well. And I think here this should work quite nicely. And on our second, invalid syntax. Forgot my plus sign operator. There we go. So if we run this now, my name is Mike, my favorite number is 13. Give me two numbers, I'll do 6 and -2, and I get the product of 6 and -2 is -12. Give me any two numbers and I'll sum them together. So if you recall, this we should allow for decimals, so I'll do 4.52 and 3.11. And look at this. This is interesting. The sum of 4.52 and 3.11 is 7.6299999999. One of the things that we're going to discuss later on is how we can round these decimal values to the appropriate level of precision. But for now, I think this is an excellent place to stop. We've seen how the input function works. We see that it returns string data types, and we see how we can cast our string data types to integers and floats so that we can perform some mathematical operations with them. Excellent job.